People listen to the prefect speak. The fear of aid workers is helping to spread the disease, health officials say. Really? Villagers flee at the sight of a Red Cross truck. When a Westerner passes, villagers cry out, Ebola, Ebola, and run away. Well, wouldn't you run away when you realize that after these people come, the disease follows? And this has been going on and on and on in Africa since the creation of all of these depopulation programs. 1974 Memorandum 200, which stated Kissinger's memorandum that they had to basically depopulate the third world and Africa. And look what's happening, and look what's happened since. Here, Red Cross workers arrived to deliver the body of Marie Kondi, 14, who had died of Ebola in Kundoni, where over 1/8 of the population, including the headman, is dead. Terrible situation. And it's definitely not from bat droppings or from some fruit bat. Come on, give me a break. Kumba Kondi cried as the body of her sister Marie arrived for burial. As the body was carried off the truck, a high-pitched wail pierced the country stillness. There is no cure, a woman cried. There is no cure. This is true. And it's horrifically, it's just an awful truth. And just a few moments, I'm going to give some proof that AIDS is a bioweapon as well, like Ebola, and has been unleashed upon the populations. And I have documented evidence to prove this. But let's stay here in Africa for a little bit. The gravedigger, Marie's half-brother, Faman Kondi, was sweating as he heaved shovels of dirt. The grave, he said, would be the 26th he had dug since the epidemic began. We're all scared here, he said. There's no solution. We can do nothing. Only God can save us. It's unbelievable, but it's true. And this is again from the New York Times. Fear of Ebola breeds a terror of physicians, and it's well rooted, as I mentioned. Here's a short little video here describing the situation in West Africa.
People are isolated, they're afraid, they're scared.
West Africa is facing the largest Ebola outbreak in history. Doctors are fighting both the disease and fears among the population. The challenges of fighting this epidemic, now on the New York Times Minute.
They say we see they go check, then people they say where they go check, they see the hole and they carry and go to hospital.
Up to 9 out of 10 people who develop Ebola symptoms die. So with few survivors emerging from the aid tents, fear has grown around the caregivers.
They think that outsiders are bringing Ebola to them instead of trying to help them get rid of Ebola.
Now, armed gangs chase health workers away from villages while the sick hide.
People are not agree, even they sick, they not agree for going to hospital because of they not get medicine. If they go for nothing.
When doctors do get patients into their makeshift hospitals, the fact remains that there is no vaccine or cure for Ebola. Once people become sick, the only treatment is to rehydrate them with electrolytes and hope for the best. The only way to stop Ebola from spreading is to keep the sick and even the dead from infecting others and tracing everyone who has been exposed. Health officials are desperately trying to educate people, but fear of Ebola seems as contagious as the virus.
I wanted to go over this thing with the Club of Rome, talking about this whole depopulation agenda and how Ebola could be a big part of it. I mean, imagine if this thing gets around the world. It'll do exactly what the elite want. If they have some sort of a bioweapon aspect, and if they weaponize this Ebola where they say there's no cure, but of course there is a cure, if it's a bioweapon, then only the select, or in this case actually you call them the elect, would get their vaccines or whatever it would be that would actually help them. And meanwhile, they poison the rest of the population and let us all perish. It's scary because it's the easiest way to accomplish this goal, their depopulation goal, the Ebola. That nuclear is destructive. The radical Islamists certainly favor it, but you would imagine. But as far as the elite that want to control or are controlling the world and want to continue to and depopulate us, this is a very tidy way to do it and have all the humanitarian assistance and everything. Look, they're running, at least they're waking up in Africa. They're running from the men in the white coats. I mean, so this study that was made in 1968, the Club of Rome, got to put on glasses, believe it or not, for reading. It helps. Sorry about that. Anyway, the Club of Rome was commissioned to develop a computer model of the world to predict the outcomes of corrections made to social and economic structures by the elect. The Club of Rome was also asked to develop a computer model of a new world order. Both tasks were accomplished. Studies were done to determine a method to arrest the population explosion before the point of no return would be reached. It was determined that an immediate attack on the problem would involve 2 points of intervention. The first was to lower the birth rate, and the second was to increase the death rate. To lower the birth rate, several programs were put into motion. The first was the development of positive birth control methods using mechanical diaphragm and condom, chemical foam and birth control, and medical sterilization, abortion, hysterectomy, etc. procedures. These were developed and implemented. The women's liberation movement was started with the demand for free abortions using pro-choice as its rallying cry. Homosexuality was encouraged and gay liberation was born. Homosexuals do not have children. Zero population growth became a hot subject at cocktail parties. Individual freedom, in the heat of the moment, religion, and the old blue laws sabotaged these efforts. And while zero population growth became a reality in some areas, population increased rapidly in others. And, you know, I'm just going to put a little note in this, is the fact that now in school, in my son's school and here in Connecticut, all the schools are now being integrated with the Obamacare. So now they have these little clinics that'll give you condoms to 15-year-old kids. They'll give you birth control. They'll give you abortions if you want them. They'll give you all these things. And I kid you not. In fact, I'm not really prepared for it because I'm on this. But tomorrow night, I'm going to cover this whole thing with the Common Core education and now being put together with the school systems being merged with the Obamacare. So all this socialist, totalitarian, you know, prison without bars, you know, embrace your servitude without realizing you're a slave, you know. As Goethe said, no one is more hopelessly enslaved than that who falsely believes themselves to be free. But getting back to this death rate, this is what they're doing. So the alternative left to the world's ruling class was to increase the death rate. This was a difficult thing to do as no one wanted to pick people out of a crowd. So neither did they relish the consequences of an enraged public. So what they did was they actually targeted the gay population. They targeted the African American and Latino populations with bioweapons. And of course, that's what AIDS was intended to do. And this goes into a study that was had been participated, a population control study in 1957. War put on the back burner to simmer, but may become a reality as it has many times since, and unfortunately. Several top secret recommendations were made by Dr. Aurelio Pesce of the Club of Rome. He advocated that a plague, listen to this, be introduced that would have the same effect as the famous Black Death of history. The chief recommendation was to develop a microbe which would attack the autoimmune system and thus render the development of a vaccine impossible. The orders were given to develop the microbe and to develop a prophylactic and a cure. The microbe would be used against the general population and would be introduced by vaccine. The prophylactic was used by the ruling elite. The cure would be administered to the survivors when it was decided that enough people had died. The cure would be announced as the newly developed reality when in fact it had existed from the beginning. This plan is part of Global 2000. The prophylactic and the cure are suppressed. Man has skyrocketed from a defensive position largely subordinated to nature's alternatives to a new and dominant one. Funding obtained for this, actually I'm going to go into this, the above words, all these words I'm going to read to you right now were stated by Dr. Aurelio Pesce. Man has skyrocketed from a defensive position largely subordinated to nature's alternatives to a new and dominant one. From it, he not only can and does influence everything in the world, but voluntarily or unwittingly can and indeed does determine the alternatives of his own future, and ultimately must choose his options for it. In other words, his novel power condition practically compels him to take up new regulatory functions that willy-nilly he has to discharge with respect to the world's mixed natural human systems. Listen to this guy. Having penetrated a number of erstwhile mysteries and be able to sway events massively, he is now vested with unprecedented tremendous responsibilities and thrown into the new role of moderator of life on the planet, including his own. Those are the words of Dr. Aurelio Picet, page 607, taken verbatim from the Global 2000 report to the President. Funding was obtained from the U.S. Congress under House Bill 15090 in the amount of $10 million in 1969 and was given to the Department of Defense's 1970 budget. Testimony before the Senate committee revealed that they intended to produce a synthetic biological agent, an agent that does not naturally exist and for which no natural immunity could have been acquired. Within the next 5 to 10 years, it would be probably possible to make a new infective microorganism which could differ in certain important aspects from any known disease-causing organisms. Most important of these is that it might be refractory to the immunological and therapeutic processes upon which we depend to maintain our relative freedom from infectious disease. Sir Julian Huxley said, "Overpopulation is, in my opinion, the most serious threat to the whole future of our species." This project, or the project called MK Naomi, was carried out at Fort Detrick, Maryland. Since large populations were to be decimated, the ruling elite decided to target the undesirable elements of society. Specifically targeted were the black, Hispanic, and homosexual populations. The poor homosexuals were encouraged on one hand and scheduled for extinction on the other hand. Same thing they're doing with the women. Same thing, the war on women. What about the war on genitalia mutilation? You know, why do they have to say that there's this war on women when it's just like, you know, are you kidding me? Everyone has more opportunity in this country if you want to work hard and do things than anywhere in the world. Stop bitching and complaining how underprivileged you are and what a victim you are. Get up and work. Earn your keep. And you might even surprise yourself and do even better than you ever thought. But you're not going to just sit on your ass and be a socialist and take a welfare check or take money because you're not earning enough. Come on. Wake up. Come on. Grow up, I should say. It's like you're a child, people like this. Anyway, getting back to this population thing, which is really important. Now, the policy committee of the Bilderberg Group, based in Switzerland, gave these orders for MK Naomi to be put in place with a smallpox vaccine. Now, this is how it started. This is why they see the men in the red coats and they run, because they have a historical knowledge that the African continent was infected with smallpox via smallpox vaccine in 1977 with the AIDS virus. That's where it came out. The vaccine was administered by the World Health Organization, according to Dr. Robert Strecker. Without a cure, the entire black population of Africa will be dead within 15 years. Anyway, some countries are well beyond epidemic status. So they did have a cure. Remember, they ate these very expensive ADZ drugs and all of this, and they did stop the rage of AIDS because they've always had a cure, and they've always planned it this way. That's why it looks as like there's still a battle. It's still out there, but we can treat it. It's just horrible as they continue to depopulate. Now, the U.S. population was infected in 1978 with the hepatitis B vaccine. Dr. Wolf Smutsness, the ex-roommate of Pope John Paul II, was the mastermind behind the November 78 to 79 and in March 1980 to October 81 experimental hepatitis B trials conducted by the Center for Disease Control in New York, San Francisco, and 4 other American cities. He loosed the plague of AIDS upon the American people. The gay population was infected. The ads for participants specifically asked for promiscuous homosexual male volunteers. Whatever causes AIDS was in the vaccine. The vaccine was manufactured and bottled in Phoenix, Arizona. The order, as I said, was given by the policy committee of the Bilderberg Group in Switzerland, and other measures were also ordered. One you'd be able to find on your own, and the easiest is to check, is the Hague-Kissinger depopulation policy. I mean, they write this shit down, ladies and gentlemen. has been unleashed upon the populations, and I have documented evidence to prove this. But let's stay here in Africa for a little bit. The gravedigger, Marie's half-brother, Faman Kandi, was sweating as he heaved shovels of dirt. The grave, he said, would be the 26th he had dug since the epidemic began. We're all scared here, he said. Here, Red Cross workers arrived to deliver the body of Marie Kandi, 14, who had died of Ebola in Kundoni, where over 1/8 of the population, including the headman, is dead. Terrible situation. And it's definitely not from bat droppings or from some fruit bat. Come on, give me a break. Kumbak. People listen to the prefect speak. The fear of aid workers is helping to spread the disease, health officials say. Really? Villagers flee at the sight of a Red Cross truck. When a Westerner passes, villagers cry out, Ebola, Ebola, and run away. Well, wouldn't you run away when you realize that after these people come, the disease follows? And this has been going on and on and on in Africa since the creation of all of these depopulation programs. 1974 Memorandum 200, which stated Kissinger's memorandum that they had to basically depopulate the third world and Africa. And look what's happening, and look what's happened since. Kandi cried as the body of her sister Marie arrived for burial. As the body was carried off the truck, a high-pitched wail pierced the country stillness. There is no cure, a woman cried. There is no cure. This is true. And it's horrifically, it's just an awful truth. And just a few moments, I'm going to give some proof that AIDS is a bioweapon as well, like Ebola and